Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Built to Scale. And today's guest is Jason Lee. And Jason's a really good friend of mine, both here in Houston. Jason's with Exponent Prosperity Advisors. They are a wealth management firm in Houston and Jason personally has some specialty in working with a lot of construction business owners, ultimately figure out how to grow their long-term wealth and to have, a beautiful exit, from their business and to be able to enjoy their life or build a legacy and however they want to do it. And so super stoked that I could have you on, Jason. That just grateful to have you as a friend as well, but super stoked I could have you on today.
Glad to be here, man. I've always admired the show and the work that you're doing, and being a friend of yours and having developed our relationship. I'm honored to get the chance to spend time with you. So
For anybody that's watching and not listening, I did decide to rep the cap today. That we are repping the Brady CFO logo, but I did get treatment on my forehead the other day, so nobody gets to see the new hair. That Jason comes in with this slick haircut every 2 weeks and always looks sharp. That I know I'm not looking quite as sharp today. So, but reasons for that. So, Jason, first for our audience, love to hear a little bit about who you are personally. What makes up Jason. What's life outside of helping clients build and grow their wealth. And then what do you do at Exponent Prosperity Advisors?
great. So I want to give you the quick synopsis, right? I'm Jason Lee. I'm from Deer Park. I'm a Houston native, so Deer Park being a suburb, and grew up in this industry or in this area. Started the first half of my career was in the health industry, and then I moved from health to wealth about a decade ago, and got into this business. Originally, it started with a more traditional investment advisory firm, and by traditional, I guess when I explain more about what we do, I'll explain how we're different. And then came to work at this firm about 8 years ago. Loved the entrepreneurial spirit, have a heart for capitalism, have a heart for all things that I think make this country great, which is the chance to be able to build and do great things, and then figure out ways to be more creative so that you can do it more and take care of your legacy. It's what fires me up every single day. I've got a beautiful 16-year-old daughter. I have a beautiful wife. And my heart, I have a heart for kind of all things men's mentoring, discipleship, connecting. Just if I love to gather folks together, especially men, and bring them together, and then help try to figure out ways to help shape them to go out and be their best. And it's just a passion of mine. I'm one of those guys who didn't really grow up with a lot of male role models. Was fortunate enough to pick some up along the way, and then realize that I think that we have a systemic gap in the marketplace and in our world today of males out there being led the right way and doing things the right way. And so that's where my heart lies. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Appreciate the personal insight there, and yeah, passion for helping men thrive. That yeah, even our audience is a lot of just by nature, the industry that we're talking about, right? That I mean, even as we're recording this, technically this is Women in Construction Week, and so we go on LinkedIn and we see a lot of posts about women in construction. There certainly are female construction business owners, and hey, hats off to them because we know that this is a pretty male dominated industry, but
100%.
realize
Yeah.
yeah, but realizing it is male dominated, and I think you and I both know that the burden men tend to get really quiet and don't share the struggles that they're going through, and business ownership is a real struggle. It causes a lot of stress that people bring home, and so love your passion for being able to foster and help and develop men. So appreciate you,
Awesome.
brother.
Thank you,
Yeah.
brother.
So I think and for our audience, right? Like, and I think this is the thing is I want to work together in this, Jason, because I think you and I know this, but I want our audience to have this value of, I think, personal wealth management versus corporate finances. And that tends to get segregated for a lot of people in their mindset of how they think about those two functions. And so some of our audience may be thinking to themselves, why in the world do I have a wealth manager here? That isn't this the guy that manages my 401k over here? What does that have to do with, running the finances of my business? And so I think there's probably a strong perception out there. I believe it that, hey, the wealth manager is the guy running the 401k and takes care of my personal assets. What does this have to do with my business? What would you say to that?
Well, I would tell you this. If you're a business owner and your idea of a wealth manager, or the person that you call your wealth manager is the guy who manages your 401k, then you don't have a wealth manager. And I don't want to knock that. There's plenty of wealth managers in the world, in the marketplace, whose job is to manage the wealth of W-2 earners and people like that, who that's how they're leaning into their retirement. But if you're in the privately held business owner space, then the likelihood is that your wealth is probably comprised, if not 70 to 80% of your business. And so having somebody who understands that and can tap into the value of your company and help you either emphasize the growth of that being your wealth driver, or that business being the cash mechanism that funds your wealth driver through other mechanisms. And I have clients that do both. But if you can't have somebody who understands all of that, liabilities, cash flow, taxes, one of your major leaks, and then how that then bleeds to you personally, and then what it's going to look like when you step out of that business someday, and then the people inside of it. I mean, I call it the second biggest asset you have is probably your top 3 to 5 key producers on your team. I can promise you this: they're probably making more ROI for you and your bottom line than your 401k is, right? And so you need somebody who can see across those things and then integrate those things so that you're looking at a true comprehensive wealth plan, right?
I mean, you can have a retirement account that's fully funded, but if you have an over leveraged business asset and it falls apart, you better believe that you're going to be looking to scrape some money from that retirement account anyways, right? So,
Right, right. Well,
the
so
reality
here's
that
something that I always laugh about. And it's just simple. It's just kind of a mathematical thing. So we call it closing a wealth gap, right? But if I was to talk to a lot of successful business owners, like when I say successful, right, I mean you're paying yourself, right? You've got enough profit left over. Those are typically my clients, right? Not that they're not successful when they're kind of doing a lifestyle business and they're making a little bit, but let's say you're taking home 500,000 and above, right? Well, if you think, okay, well, someday I'm going to be done working, or I'm tired of managing the risk, or whatever, for that to really last your lifestyle, unless you have other assets that are going to kick off 500,000 and above, you're going to need probably somewhere around right now $7 to $10 million in assets to do that. So in your brain, you better either know that that business is going to be worth 7 to 10 million, or you better be building something else outside of it or a combination of the two. And so you really kind of have to measure value in the company plus what's left in your assets to kick that off, so that when you do have to step away, and for all those that are like, I'm never leaving my business, I got news for you. God's the one who makes that up. You don't get to choose that, because there's people who get Alzheimer's, there's people whose wives get cancer, there's people who get all kinds of crap that go on in their lives, and they wake up one day, because I get those phone calls and they say, I'm done, man. Like, I'm done. And then unfortunately, a lot of times when those calls do come, the work's not been done. And so, they have to see a dramatic shift in how they intend to live their life going forward, because the business is no longer there to produce cash.
I love how simplistic you made that. I mean, if you have a certain lifestyle income that you've been living off of, that you and your family have gotten familiar with, and for all good reasons. I mean, I don't know too many business owners that are thinking selfishly, like, I just want to go buy this, I want to go buy that. I want to be able to take my family on a good vacation. I want to have, more experiences. I want to have, the cabin up in the woods or whatever, because I really want to have a place to where I can congregate my family and enjoy these family experiences. And those are the majority of people I feel like I'm talking to. And it's all good things, but the reality is you build that lifestyle, and you just said it so simplistically, that, or so simple, I should say, of, hey, in order to continue to operate that, when you retire, you're going to need this amount of assets. And if you haven't funded, an outside retirement account with that, that your business got to be worth that much when you exit, in order to make this function and keep this flywheel
One of the
going.
two,
And
right? Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and so that reality that, yeah, and I mean, some owners may have, outside assets, great. But the biggest asset that you can have that can impact your personal financial planning literally is your business, if you're a business owner. I mean, um, I don't know if have you ever seen a situation where somebody has a retirement account that is vastly greater in value than their business itself?
Not with business owners, no. By no means, right? And I've seen business owners, and I have some that they use their construction business to fund and develop real estate projects, and so real estate becomes the wealth vehicle. And then so there's a lot of that, right? Because construction companies, especially, not everybody wants to run a construction company. When you actually get to the bottom line, and in some instances, you're looking at 5 and 6% for an ROI, net income in some of these instances, especially for GCs, as they get, it becomes even more of a complex mindset. You're like, do people don't realize, like, there's not a huge marketplace for people running around going, I want to pay for something that I got to take all this risk. bond, do all this stuff to come home and net a 5% risk. I mean, someone who's buying that business and has the capital to buy that business can park their money over here and earn 5%, or slightly more in a low risk asset, or stick into the stock market, and even over 10 years, maybe average 7 to 8%. And if they're averaging that, and yeah, the market will go down some years, but if you look at it over 100 years, it's always been up. So it's just, if someone's going to take that risk, so I think it's important for business owners to get, like, you either better figure out how you're going to make it valuable where somebody would want to buy it, or you better be figuring out how to cash flow it into other things to combine with it when it comes to sell. So you're not pigeonholed into your being your only basket. Unfortunately, and unfortunately, I run into so many people, and it's sometimes it's just heartbreaking because they get to the season, and then their family's got dementia, and now they're trying to figure out how to, take care of the dad and get him out of the business. And all of a sudden they're like, well, how do we keep dad cash flowing? Cause he's really kind of hindering the payroll, cause we're paying him and he was just kind of a figurehead, and now we got to fund him. And then you look at it and you're like, dude, there's really nothing. There's, like, not even a lot of banks are want to finance that deal, and so it's just being real mindful. And I think that's when people have to pivot from, am I running a lifestyle business, or am I looking at a legacy business? Am I building something that is really going to be a transferable asset that I can start to bolt on things that are going to go in and drive its value.
I think, that leads to the next thought for me that, to your point, I mean, one, like construction businesses generally are not huge margin businesses. There are some that, by exception, just they're in something very niche. And I will say that over the long term, those profit margins, those high profit margins don't exist. It's that there was some unique market opportunity for a period of time. They nailed it. But that doesn't mean that that's going to exist for years to come. And like you said, I mean, I read a book somewhere, that the top 2% of general contractors in the United States can expect a net profit margin between 8 to 10%. And it's, like, God bless general contractors. And
Yeah,
because,
man. I mean,
yeah,
right?
I mean, you're doing it for labor of love at that point, right? But all this said, a lot of lower middle market construction companies, they're facing challenges with, their own backlog, their own pipeline, wondering where the next job is going to be. And I know, for good wealth planning to really, think about, because at the end of the day, we're talking to our audience that they're usually pass through business owners. At the end of the day, how your business performs affects your personal net wealth. And so these two go hand in hand together. But the reality of, they are already struggling just planning in their business for the next 12 months sometimes. And then we're talking about develop a 30-year plan for when, or 10 or 20 or whatever it might be, until, you need to retire. What would you say, to the business owner that's already struggling in the day to day, that what are the right next steps that they should be taking to begin that planning endeavor, knowing that you have to start sooner than later to think about the long term? What would you say to them?
Well, let's start here. I think I would love everybody to start with the end in mind, but we have to be realist, okay? And let me give you my own personal example, right? I'm a realist, and I started in my business, and guess what? I'm a business owner. While I work for my firm, I am a solopreneur inside of it, right? I pay for my marketing. I go out and build relationships with guys like you, so I can get introductions to clients. So over 8 years, it wasn't until the last 3 years that I was able to manifest the things that I teach and start doing them myself. So even though I had the end in mind, I was out teaching and educating and training and doing, but man, my income was not such. I was still looking at every year going, hey, dude, I just gotta, like, pay for my marketing budget. I gotta pay for the organizations I'm a part of. I gotta pay. I still want to take my wife on vacation this year. We want to upgrade the couch. So, like, those things were just still happening. And so, I think there's like a curve for everybody. And so, I guess the first thing that I would say is I wouldn't want somebody to be discouraged in the sense that they're maybe their head down and focused on it. So you got to just learn the balance of it, right? And so that's why I started out with once you've paid yourself, you've got some money left over. Then you kind of raise your head up and you can see the forest over the trees. Then you can really start to think. And I'll be candid with you. I run into guys who get introduced to me all the time as prospects, one of which I refer to you. right? And they're calling me and they're like, I'm having a big year, man. Come talk to me. And they're like, I want to give you $100,000. And I'll ask them questions like, okay, well, what does next year look like for you? What is your backlog? What does your cash flow look like? How much do you need to continue to build on what you're building? And then when they can't answer those questions, I'm saying we don't even need to think for right now about what we're going to do for the next 30 years, because you've got to get fundamentals in your business to even be able to get your mind wrapped around it. You're for lack of a better term, living paycheck to paycheck, but it's just job to job. So if you can move from job to job to an actual fundamental backlog, an understanding of your cash flow, an understanding of what you need to do to go scale the business. And when you can do that, right? And then you sit down and you get to the end of the year and it's not a surprise for you and you go, wow, okay, I've got this. And you're going to look up and you're going to look at your account and you're going to go, I've got enough money to handle the business. And now I've got extra, right? That's when it really makes sense to start thinking about, hey, let's start thinking about what's next. Because let me be candid. When you have something like that, you have something of value. Until you have something like that, you have a job and nobody's going to pay you for it. So it doesn't, so go fix your asset. So I would say start with so yes, do we all want to start with like, I don't know a single business owner who said, you know what I love to do is just work my ass off. Oh, sorry. Work my tail off till I'm dead. Right. Like, and then I could just say I worked hard. Like everybody said, hey, I'm leaving corporate America. I'm taking this risk. I'm going to go out there and risk it all. I mean, gosh, bless America. We can do that. Right. And then goes and kills it and then grows their business only so that they can go in and say, I want this so I can have financial independence. Now, I know a lot of guys who have now transitioned their business to where they're in the space of doing those things. And then when they do go to business, they're hunting with their clients, they're fishing with their clients. That's why I love construction. They're doing all the cool tax strategies that you can do as an owner to maximize stuff by having some assets in they got some really cool stuff that they're doing, and it all is part of their lifestyle. So they don't really think of exit. But at that point in time, when business feels that easy is when you've got to go in your brain and say, okay, but what's next? What could happen and how do I start planning? Because prior to that, you can do a lot of thinking about it, but a lot of instances I'll like people that I meet that are on that journey, those become my prospects, right? They're not a client. They're somebody that I'm now shepherding and I'm introducing them to a Mason Brady to help them get their finances done. I'm introducing them to somebody help them with their benefits. I'm introducing them to somebody because they're not really looking at risk the right way. I'm introducing them to a coach to help them get their systems in place. Whatever it is, because I can see that they'll never be able to think what they need to think for exit someday and wealth and true wealth, until they can see over the trees, right? So I think it's when you get over the trees is when you can see where your legacy's at. When you're still in the trees, you're just, you're in the forest, man. Like that's just is what it is. So, and nothing wrong with being in the forest, man. I was in the forest for the first 5 years of my career doing this, right?
It's that idea as to when you're not in the forest. But I would say sometimes business owners think they're not in the forest anymore, but they still are. And I think
Are we
that's
all?
yeah, I mean, but I would say I've seen too businesses, especially construction businesses, they have a great year. They performed well on some jobs, but they still don't have several business fundamentals in place of, truly understanding what is the strength of your backlog. And do you have, a business development pipeline that's bringing you in other work, that do you have diversification, your client mix, et cetera? Like all of these things that you can have a great year and you can feel like you're on this high that all of a sudden I can begin long range planning. And I mean, literally, we've had some clients that do that. And then, I mean, the next year it's like, I am in the trenches again and even worse than I ever was. Because, um, they thought to themselves that, and they may have gone and, put money in a piece of real estate because they felt like they had the cash to do that. And we would have wanted to tell them, nah, not really a great idea, that you need to preserve your balance sheet, et cetera. And so, um, I guess I'm interested because, you know, they can think that they're at the top, but they may not quite be there, right? Or at least it's a point at which when they're at a high, they need to begin thinking about that planning. It's not that like, hey, there's not sharks in the water, but you're still finally at a point to where you can think about planning, right? Um, what would you say? Because you even made a really good LinkedIn post the other day about this Frankenstein planning, right? Of, business owners have all these different advisors coming and saying these different things. I think that's the thing is I'm looking at like, hey, we need to have a holistic plan for that business owner that, okay, you had a great year. Can you do it again? And how do we know that you can do it again to be able to say that these are the next steps of what you should be doing, and that you're not going to suck cash out of this business and it's going to completely destroy things, right? What would you say? How do you go about better holistic planning like that? Like, how can a business owner know who to call in at what cadence to make sure that, okay, feel like I can do long term planning? How do I do this? And who do I do it with?
For depending on the situation, when I always think it's important to have, essentially your board, right? Like you should put together a board, and that board should consist of several advisors. And typically what happens is this, a business owner that can pour concrete starts a business, starts kicking ass, starts pouring concrete. They call their buddies, they start working, they're working their tail off. And they're really not making any money in the first couple of years. They're just pouring it right back in the business. So there's really no tax problems. Then all of a sudden they start making a little money. They start thinking, oh crap, I need to save on taxes. So they get a better tax advisor. That tax advisor says, hey, go open up this IRA thing, or 401k thing, so you can save some tax. And they throw a couple of little widget tax ideas to them, but they're really not thinking about strategy around cash flow and what that's going to look like. They're just throwing on some what I would consider low hanging fruit tax strategies without like looking at the bill. And then they got a guy and a buddy who's like, hey, my buddy said this, and they're like, oh, well, that sounds like a cool idea. And so then they call that guy, and that guy does they're come in and he sells them some stuff and does this thing. And, next thing you know, they wake up, and that's what I call Frankenstein planning. They've created this monster that they don't even understand how it communicates and works together. So, I think the first thing that a business owner needs to get, and they need to get their mind wrapped around, and I don't know who it is that helps them do this, right? Whether it's a fractional CFO like you, or a true kind of business coach, like somebody who can get them to understand how to project and how to build out their pipeline in a way that they can forecast their business in a manageable way, right? Now, in the first couple of years, that's hard to do, right? Like, and what I mean by that is like in my first few years, I just went, right? I always say the saying, I just put my pants on, man, and the Lord does the rest. And what I mean by that is I said, I'm going to go to this organization and I'm going to go try this. So when you're first pouring concrete or whatever, you're like, I'm going to take whatever job I can get, and I'm going to just, like I got to go work and I got to put food on the table. And that's what happens. And that's okay. Right. And that's going to be for a few years. But what you should be tracking is, where's that job come from? Where did it go? What's my cost of goods sold? What is my billable? So you're going to go down and look at what's the job cost averaging for this? How much did I lose in lost labor on because I did it wrong? Like all of those things should be at some point in time being tracked back, so you can start to at least get some kind of analyzation around what you're doing. So that's I don't know if that's your bookkeeper, or if it starts with your CFO, if it's in your case probably a fractional CFO who you need to start with, or a controller, or maybe it's getting a business coach who helps you understand how a P&L works and teaches you how to operate or how to plan. Not everybody who starts a business is really a business operator to start. They're a craftsman who's really good at their job and has more tenacity than other people, right? Has more fire than other people. So I can't really tell you who to start with, because I think it's probably case by case on a skill set perspective. But what I can tell you is if you don't know where you're going with your business, and you don't know how to articulate how to scale it, and then how to manage the capital inside of it, then you can do a lot of other things. But the hub that's going to drive any of those other things, you'll never be able to get your mind wrapped around. And so, and which is again why when people approach me now, let's be clear, I'll still meet people who are having success, and they found a way to do that through grit and determination. And a lot of times I'll do their business valuation, and through that I'll show them all the risks of the things that they're not doing, and then make those introductions. And amazingly, right, they go from making $1 million net income to $2 or $3 million in net income. And they're like, what in the heck? How, so they were going to be fine. They were millionaires and they were making great money and had a beach house and a truck and all this stuff. And then they just closed the gap. And then I think to myself, had you done that 20 years ago, right? Like, had you done that 10 years ago, started out the gate, bolting on these pieces, but which cart goes first, it's hard to say. I think it's going to be predicated on the situation, the acumen of the operator, and who you bring in. But let me just say this: if you are in a business owner, the successful ones, meaning the ones that I see that regularly are successful, um, we're involved, right? Because we've crafted a comprehensive plan that's strategic so that their taxes work in concert with their wealth, their real estate works in concert, and so whatever they're doing, they're all working together collaboratively. They typically have a strong financially acumen partner, whether it be a fractional CFO or a CFO, or somebody who can facilitate that. Most of them have either adopted some type of leadership or coaching practice, whether it be EOS, or they've hired some type of coach, Pinnacle. They've brought in some type of system to help them take their business to some type of organizational structure, and then they typically have and then your basics, right? You got to have risk management. You got to have these people, but there's a big difference between people who will just price you into insurance value or somebody who's actually going to help you facilitate risk management. So the ones that I see, and then the last thing, and I don't want to forget this, a peer group, whether it be C12, Vistage, some type of peer group where you can be with other operators who can also share some of their best practices. And like I always say, you can shamelessly steal from other people and adopt those things and then go take them and do them yourself. And so I think without a peer group, there's a gap. So which order you do that, I don't know, but I definitely think they're almost all needed. And when I see that, if I see a business owner and they have all those things and they're working together, and meaning kind of in concert, oh man, those people are firing it away. That's the guy who his business is worth a ton and he never wants to sell it because he's making a ton of cash and he's not working a ton and he's enjoying the heck out of life. You know?
And not to say that it's not important to have other considerations. I mean, that like I've heard it put well once, from a CPA, a tax advisor that, we had a client that always wanted to hammer down his tax liability to nothing. And it's like, well, all you're really doing is kicking down the can, with some deferral strategies. All you're doing is kicking the problem, down the road. You will eventually have a tax bill at some point. But, the reality of it's also a great thing to have a tax problem, because it means that you did something right in regards to you're making money, right? And so if you have a looming tax bill now, it's a problem when you took all the liquidity out of the business, that produced the looming tax bill. That's its own issue. But if you have a large tax bill, it usually means that you did something right in the business at the end of the day, anyways. And so, but all that said, what I heard a lot of actually in there, which was actually really good. You talked about EOS, you talked about executive coaches, you talked about peer groups, and granted, trying to reduce tax liabilities, keep liquidity in the business, and that's all excellent. But all of this had to do with creating a really good operating machine, creating a really good asset of a business, and knowing your business well and knowing that there's predictability around it, right? That literally over the next 12 months, that outside of a COVID type of event, that generally we could predict what's going to happen and that we have good pipeline, we have good backlog, we have a good business development function, we have a good operating team, that the business can continue to run and can run successfully and continue to thrive and evolve. And at the end of the day, you have to build that up. That I heard so much in there about focusing on building this operating asset that can just churn and getting the asset. And the reason I bring this up is I think so many people are looking for, oh, what complex strategy do all the high income earners take advantage of that I'm not able to take advantage of today? And like, I want that little trick, right? And it's like, well, they're able to take advantage of that stuff because they have a really good operating asset. Focus on that first,
Yeah, true
build
story.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah, build that. And then you will have the opportunity to take advantage of other tax advantage strategies, but build the asset first, build the operating machine, and then you can do whatever the heck you want to do after that.
yeah. So this morning, I had a client in my office, and we were talking about some really cool stuff that's about to happen, and it's the strategy. And when he hired us 3 years ago, it was because he thought he was there, and then that the last 3 years did what it does to most business owners. It just kicked them all over the place, and tariffs and uh, price changes and all this different stuff. And so throughout all of that, we had said, "Hey, these are some cool ideas. and then it all kind of washed away because they had to get back. He thought he was about to get over the trees, and then the tree monster just sucked him back in. Right, so he got back in the forest, and he was just fighting through the trees. And then we talked at the end of last year. He called me up, and we were having some fellowship, and he said, dude, I'm about to get over the trees, you know? And I was like, go back in. So we sat back down and we started, did his plan. And now that we're over the trees, to your point, all the cool stuff that I get to do, like that I've been waiting for, like chomping at the bits. And, we're like showing him like millions of dollars of tax savings over his life. We're like, dude, this is going to be awesome. He's like, dude, that's so cool. And oh my gosh, we can do that. I'm like, yeah, that's because you have money. Like we
Yeah.
can, it's so cool what you can do when when you got like enough money for it to move the needle. Right. And so, but we had to get there first. Right. And so that kind of goes back to that kind of, everybody knows that there's kind of like this J curve, and in that first kind of 5 years, maybe even sometimes 7, business owners are kind of doing this, and it's just, and then they're trying, and they're learning and growing, and you know what? If they're establishing process, that's fine. That's what needs to happen. Once they've kind of whittled that down to systems, process dialed in, figured out their cogs, got their marketing figured out, got their sales team figured out. Once all those things are in place, a lot of times, man, it's like, and then it just takes off. Which, and my goal is to meet them not here on that curve, but right there, right, and or somewhere along the way, and then ride beside them, because then we can start to do the cool stuff. And people send it to me all. They're like, oh man, if I did this and I do that, I'm like, dude, that goes back to that kind of Frankenstein mentality. So here's a great
Yep.
example. Several years ago, a buddy of mine approached him for business, didn't want to do the planning. He had it figured out because he had a cool tax guy. And I was like, dude, well, just so you know, the fact that your tax guy is getting you down to no income, right? Like that's cool that he's figured out how to do all that, and that's great. I was like, but man, you're really trying to grow, and you can't get money that way. Like no one's gonna give you financing that way, and so you're gonna really struggle because you're not making any money. And so, but he's like, yeah, but I'm making money, wink, wink, and I'm like, I know what you're saying, dude. I'm just saying, like, with what you're telling me you want to have happen from growth, you look like crap to a bank. Banks don't like you, dude. You're no valuable, isn't it? And you know who you want to be friends with? The bank. You know who has all the money? The bank. So, and when he called me and was like, dude, or we were talking or something, he's like, I'm trying to buy this building. It'd be huge because then I could get real estate and I could scale my business and da 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 da. And they're telling me blah 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 blah. I'm like, yeah. So you got to show income for 2 years. So duh. So yeah, your tax guy, man, I'm so good that he's so awesome at his job, but that dude's just trying to save taxes. He's not managing your business, man. Like, so he had to go back, show taxes for 2 years. And then by the time that happened, real estate rates, all that crap was back up. So he still bought the real estate, but man, he missed a golden opportunity when the shit was cheap. And you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, he could have gotten, like now rates are floating over in the 5s, 6s, and 7s, and he was back in the 2s when we first talked about it, which is just dumb, you know? But anyways, we all been there, right? Like everybody has at some level, but that's a great example of what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, you just highlighted a clear example of just again that Frankenstein planning where, you get one person that's helping you, but it's not considering this full quarterback picture and it really does come down to like what is that long term plan? And it's hard that when you're in the trenches to think about that. You got to get yourself to a position where you're not in the trenches to begin to do a lot more of that. But yeah, you can't just take, okay, well, I get a tax advisor that rams my net income down to zero, that banks won't want to see that. It's going to cause skepticism to any equity investors as well. And they're going to want to dig in and do any due diligence if you wanted, other sources of capital. Bonding is going to have issues with that. And they're going to want to and that's why they ask for CPA audited financials, because they say, we know that you did things on your tax returns that don't reveal what is possible here.
Yeah, this guy wasn't a construction guy, but yeah, I'm just using it as an example. But if anybody in construction already knows you better have cash on your balance sheet. I mean, you're working towards cash. Until you get cash on your balance sheet, you're just going to scale how much you can grow, anyways. There's just a certain number. Your market share is this big, and the more cash you get, the bigger your market share gets in construction. That's why you need a financial team who understands what you're trying to do, and a financial planner, because you don't want a planner who's stripping cash out to develop some type of strategy that's counterintuitive to your ability to fuel your growth based on your bonding capacity. Understood. Yep.
And so, yeah, I mean, you just, again, you're just dropping little nuggets, man, like right there. It's that idea of that integrated strategy. And that's what I really want to highlight for our audience listening today is that, um, again, if you're working with a personal financial advisor that really doesn't know a whole lot about your business, doesn't really understand it, isn't talking about, with other advisors that are helping you in your business, isn't creating comprehensive strategies that I have a lot of doubt that, ultimately that business owner is going to achieve what they really want to achieve over the long term. And I'm a big believer that, having these integrated holistic plans are really important. But you highlighted in the very beginning, Jason, that, yeah, if a business owner has, a decent lifestyle income of 500,000 a year, and they want to continue that in retirement, and I get it that, for some people, they may say that, well, I'm going to have reduced expenses because I'm not going to have to worry about college tuition, all this, and that. I get it. But generally, if you want to maintain your lifestyle with inflation to any degree, and I think we've been lucky in America to maintain 2 to 3% inflation. I look at what's happening in the world and it's like that stuff can change any moment, right?
Let me just tell you truth, right? I'm going to tell you truth because I live in it every single day. Okay. I don't have anybody who's nearing retirement who's scaling down, period. Like, they're not going like, all right, well, we're here. So you know what they're doing? They're hanging out with their grandkids. They're doing cool stuff. They're trying to get all that travel that they never did while they can. They're ramping it up because they know that they're going to get old and can't travel. Medical expenses are blowing up all over the place that they never knew that they were going to have. So, I mean, dude, like this whole, like, it's going to get cheaper. I think we think that way. And I'll tell you why, because our generation, like, my generation and then the generation before us, which God bless them was a great generation. They were hard ass working people, but the capacity to build wealth wasn't the same, right? And so, they lived in this kind of era. So, like, I grew up watching my grandparents and their grandparents, like, in these little farm towns or East Texas and Arkansas and the different places my family's from. And what would happen is you get old and like that's actually what happened. Like like you huddled up into your little trailer or whatever, or your little piece of property that you've owned for years, and you really just didn't do crap from like 65 to 80. You maybe like went to the corner store and you maybe did the family reunion, but my clients, right, the people that are like today, they're like, oh no, man, like I'm I just left lunch with a client and they're like, hey, their dad's like, hey, I got a house in like Colorado. He's a successful retired business owner, and they're also a business owner. But like, they're taking the whole family. Like, he's 70. He's not hanging out going like, I'm just going to chill. My mom, right, retired CD secretary of Pasadena, not wealthy by any means, but my God, that woman spends money on grandchildren. Like, like, just
Can't stop
wild.
them.
You can't stop her. Like, right?
Yeah.
She's just burning,
Yep.
cash on them because she has a little bit of pension and a little bit of stuff, and it's more than she needs. And so she's grateful for that. And then on the polar opposite end of the spectrum is the person who I have in my family who did not do those things, did not take care of themselves, and they are living like in a really rough spot. God bless them. And so but I don't know of anybody who's operating a business who's going to go wear their ass out all their whole life, do all that they can to then be like, I'm not going to do anything. Like, no, like, just be honest with yourself.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Jason. That yeah, for our audience, that wealth management and good business practices, personal wealth management, and business practices. I hope everybody learned they go hand in hand. That they have to work in conjunction with each other, and in order to be successful in the latter, that in the wealth management and building out your future lifestyle, you gotta have a good operating business ultimately to get there. And yeah, just appreciate you, Jason. That you're a good friend, and yeah, I appreciate your wisdom and advice here of practical experience talking with clients and seeing success stories. So on the other side. So just appreciate you, brother.
Appreciate you too, brother.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Well, everybody, we'll catch you next time. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Hi, everyone. So if you enjoyed today's episode and you found value or it raised some questions for you about the next best steps for managing your finances in your construction business, please reach out to us at bradycfo.com. There's a contact page there where you can fill out and that will come straight over to us. Either that or you can personally find me on LinkedIn. My name is Mason Brady, and feel free to send me a message and happy to chat and talk through anything you're facing today and happy to provide some advice. So thank you all. Appreciate it. See you.